The College Football Playoff Selection Committee released their first rankings. I did not watch it, but it is still a topic. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State, 1 through 4. I don't know. Maybe there's a surprise. There's also 3 schools at the Big 12 at the bottom at 21, 22, 23. Maybe that helps protect Texas. Maybe that helps protect Oklahoma. I don't know, because we've said that about other conferences when they have a bunch of guys clumped at the bottom. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. Why is, and I'm not questioning, I'm asking, why is Ohio State correct at number 1?
Because they've beaten Notre Dame and they've beaten Penn State, and those are better teams than Michigan has played. Like, Michigan hasn't played teams like that. I think you can, and I have no beef with this, I think 1 through 5, you could have ordered those almost any which way, and I think you, with all these 8-0 teams, you could make an argument for all of them. I mean, they have to make arguments for that. Like, you know, if you were at Georgia number 1, be like, look, I know that they don't look like Georgia the last 2 years, but they still are the king until somebody beats them. All right, that's a good enough explanation for me in all this. This is very subjective anyway. Michigan hasn't played anybody, yeah, but they're blowing people out like they're not even there. So clearly, even though they're not playing, you know, the toughest part of their schedule right now, they're dismantling people in a way that makes you think that, yeah, there's some distance between them and normal teams, because everybody else in this top 5 has had 1, 2, or 3 scares in that, even in spite of being 8-0. If you said Florida State's number 1, of course I believe that in my heart every day, but they've got wins over LSU and Clemson and Duke, and so that's okay. They've got 3 so-and-so wins, whatever you want to say.
Don't include Clemson.
Well, it's like Clemson on Canada's a big win now.
Yeah, but
I get what you're saying. All right.
But in the committee's head, who likes logos, you know, that's probably a thing.
All right, then what logos has Georgia beaten?
I explained Georgia, they're the king until somebody knocks them off. That's what.
Okay.
But and then Washington beat Oregon in a classic battle. They're in what might be the deepest conference this year, so you can put them there. So this will all work itself out anyway, so I don't have a problem with anything. I'm a little confused how Texas is above Alabama because they beat Alabama, but Oklahoma's below them both and they beat Texas.
Recency bias?
Yeah, that's probably it. But other than that, everything's fine.
Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the Oklahoma behind Texas, you know, when Texas is above Alabama, like you said. That part's a little bit confusing. I guess you don't think Oklahoma's better than Alabama, so maybe there's the reasoning there. But then again, Texas has beaten them. So I don't know. That part of it, I guess, got a little confusing to try and sort that out the way that they best could. But, you know, beyond that, I don't have a lot of strong thoughts on the initial playoff rankings. I'm kind of like everybody else who's been brainwashed into realizing it doesn't matter, even though it matters a little bit, like as far as positioning. But as we've seen, like they can just wipe the slate clean basically, and they, you know, kind of massage this the way they want to. So I'm not going to go crazy over how's Ohio State 1 and Michigan. They're going to play each other. Like they're going to play each other. So that will work itself out. Now, granted, it's not till the end of the year, so who knows what this looks like by then. But yeah, I mean, I think Oregon, you know, obviously has to be behind Washington, although I don't know if they're worse than Washington actually. And that could be the reasoning there with Texas and Oklahoma. I think that's a similar situation there in some ways, except for the fact that Washington's obviously unbeaten, so you can't have them behind any one-loss team. So, yeah, I mean, given just kind of the crossover there, it makes sense. Nothing really jumps out to me. I don't really look at it too deep. Like Ole Miss at 10, I haven't really paid attention that far because that part doesn't really matter to me all that much right now. But good for the Kansas schools and Oklahoma State. I mean, at least a little bit of love there at the end of the poll. Now, granted, the Big 12 is going to start beating up on each other here starting this weekend a whole lot. So, you know, how many of those teams can actually hang in there and stick around, and who can get in there and, like, get into the teens and stick around there, or, you know, flirt with maybe top 10-ish, top 15-ish. They need somebody to do that. Kansas State was kind of close earlier. The way Oklahoma State's rolling right now, the way Kansas State's rolling right now, the way Kansas just beat Oklahoma, like there's opportunities there for those teams to move up. But again, you worry about them beating up on each other moving forward.
If both Texas and Oklahoma don't hold court, and I know Oklahoma's on the road, Texas at home, there's a good chance the Big 12 won't have anybody in the top 10 next week if they both don't win this weekend. But then there will be, well, Kansas State moves up even further. Oklahoma State would move up even further. And Kansas, of course, with the win against Oklahoma 41-14, Texas beat KU. So there's maybe part of that togetherness. But head-to-head's supposed to matter. But whoa! We learned that is not always the case back in the original year of 2014 with TCU and Baylor.
It's the same thing. And again, this will, it's the first week, but it is kind of confusing. And sometimes I do think that once they get past the top, 5 and they get into everybody who's 7-1, they just start listing people. And then, you could based on the answer that Bill Hancock and Boo Corrigan gave in the teleconference last night.
You listened to that?
Oh, I read it.
Okay.
I read it when they sent it. I'm not going to listen to it. I'll read it when they send me the transcript. I appreciate Ted Ganji for doing that. So I read it, and it was one of those things. There's always one question that sometimes they want to walk out of the room, and they're like, crap, we skipped that.
Yeah.
We were just trying to get out to the press conference and do the media thing because they kind of circled around it, and basically they said, look, it's going to work itself out. It'll all come out in the wash at the end. And when Craig and I had Kirby Hook on, we asked him about that job, and he's like, yeah, it's the hardest thing in the world. And that guy's pretty smooth, when it comes to, evading and answering questions. And I say that very complimentary. He's a very smooth operator. But it's a tough job when you walk out and they ask you these questions.
It shouldn't be a tough job if you've done it the right way, in my opinion. Now, whatever they said this week, we'll find out if that's the same criteria as they use when they give us the top 16 next week. Now, here's a couple of historical perspectives. In the history of when they started the college football playoff standings, here are the numbers of times that schools have been ranked in at least 1 through 16. Not a surprise for most of these. Alabama, Ohio State, the Clemson, then you have Oklahoma, Notre Dame down the list, Utah, LSU, Oklahoma State with a very nice number at 38. Go down to the bottom level of 26 times Michigan State, Iowa, Mississippi State, and Baylor have been ranked inside the college football standings. 14, 15, part of 16, and then, of course, in 19 and even 2021 was the case for that. So there's no surprise there, but at least a list of those who have been ranked at least once or at least 26 times since they began in 2014. Now, this one here stunned me for a minute, and then I was like, wow, teams that have not been ranked. Kansas was ranked this week. It's the first time since the College Football Playoff Committee started this. The 5 schools that have not been ranked in the College Football Playoff Top 25, Cal, Maryland Rutgers, Texas Tech, and Vanderbilt. I thought Tech would have been in there just in the 20s at some point, but not the case from Brett McMurphy from the Action HQ Network.
Yeah, there's not really too much surprise with those 5 teams. Texas Tech hasn't been very good at all. They've been average. So, that's not that surprising. And those other teams, I don't need to even think that hard to be surprised or not surprised by the fact that Cal's not been in the top 25 or playoff rankings or that Vanderbilt hasn't. I get what you think, though, with, just over time that you think just about everybody would have appeared in there. But, yeah, that group of schools that hasn't is not the flashiest group of schools. So, Cal, Rutgers, and Vanderbilt in particular. If you would have said, hey, guess who's probably not been in the rankings at all? I think Cal probably gets mentioned. I think Rutgers, if somebody can think of them, probably does. And Vanderbilt definitely gets mentioned. Maryland and Tech, a little bit more surprising there. But, yeah, that just goes to show you that it's not a guarantee that you're just going to appear in those things. And those programs have obviously had some ups and downs along the way. So, yeah, not a list you want to be a part of.
All right, so now we gave you the 16 in the college football playoff. Go ahead.
I want to go back to is there any way you can pull up the graphic right before that showed the all-time appearances? So there's Utah at 42. There's a team coming in. So you lose Oklahoma at 47 appearances. If you're looking from a Big 12 perspective, you don't exactly replace them with Utah, but you get pretty close as far as playoff appearances go. So that's, positive in a way. There's no Texas on here anywhere. Yep. So, they're going to lose a lot by losing that program. But as far as the playoff goes, they've been a non-factor thus far. So that's not as big of a blow. So that's just something that popped out is obviously seeing Oklahoma there. And that will be a huge boon for the SEC. We'll now have 2 of the top 4 most appearances all time in the playoff as well. So, USC will add to the Big Ten total, as will Oregon. And so that Big Ten side of things is going to be gigantic when you add just the playoff appearances all together, and the Pac will obviously go away. But that's just a couple of other things that also stood out to me.
It's hard to imagine, and of course, if they beat Kansas State Saturday and they continue to roll, and again, that who knows, that Texas, since the college football playoff arrived in 2014 with just 4 schools, has never been in that conversation. Never. Not once. And this year they're trying to force themselves through, and they have it in front of them to possibly do that, especially being number 7 off the top. Now, if this was a 12-team playoff this year, just if it was, this would be kind of fun. Here are the first-round games, including Alabama and Oklahoma, Michigan against Tulane, Texas and Ole Miss, Oregon and Penn State, and they would go on to win to play the next round against those 4 top seeds.
I'll tell you, I would be watching as a fan of any of these, just terrified that the worst matchup is going to win. I would not enjoy 1 second of the Oregon-Penn State game. It would just be me like overanalyzing it to the hilt.
Why?
Because that's who Florida State would play.
Yeah, I know.
And I would just be like, oh my God, Bo Nix is so good. Oh, look, Drew Aller just threw for 385 yards. He's never done that before.
Yeah.
Penn State figured out their offense. What's going on? Like, that's how I would watch that game.
At least you get to sit back and watch.
Yeah, that would be great.
And wait for somebody. There you go, Craig. Top 12. If, in fact, that was going on this season, of course it's not.
Who wants this? I'd rather see Texas Ole Miss in a Cotton Bowl that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we talking about here? Who doesn't want Michigan Tulane in the Meineke Car Care Bowl as opposed to a college football playoff semifinal where the winner can go play Washington to get into the semifinals? Yeah, that sucks. Who came up with this stupid concept? No, I mean, this is awesome. And there's not, the thing about it is there will be, only certain teams are going to be built for it. Yeah, the same teams that are built to win it pretty much every single year. The odds of a Tulane beating Michigan are okay. The odds of them beating Michigan and then beating Washington get lower. The odds of them beating Michigan and Washington and then Ohio State, Bama, or OU are nearly impossible. The possibility of doing all those things and then get to the championship is not likely. But guess what? It's not that different percentage-wise probably from their chances right now anyway. So I think that this is fun. Tulane, Michigan, Alabama, OU, Texas, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State. Yeah, give me all those freaking games, and then give me the winner advances to play those other 4, and then so on and so forth. So there's going to be some serious attrition, and I don't know how all that's going to work out in the wash, but yeah, I am more interested in this. Even though I'm some ways a traditionalist, I am more interested in this than seeing Oregon, Penn State in the Alamo Bowl, and then the winner gets the trophy, and then they move on and they look at their final ranking. That's all there is to it. Give me them in the whatever it is. What does that say at the bottom? Or I know that would be in you. Yeah, give me them at it's obvious as well. The home games, like that added to it as well, and then move them on into they play the Orange Bowl against Florida State, and it's not just you get the orange the basket, you get then that, and you've already had this massive playoff home win, and then you go to a semifinal where you play like Georgia. I mean that's gonna be freaking awesome. Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm in a minority here,
Hell
but
no. How about
I think
just
this
Oklahoma and Alabama just because?
I mean, imagine that in Norman with the playoffs, berth into the second round
or
wherever. Yeah, wherever they have it on campus and they host a playoff game and then get to go and play in a major bowl venue. I think it's freaking awesome, and it'll make for incredible television. I don't know why we bogged down of like, well, Tulane will never be able to. Okay, so the one game out of those 4, is the reason why we shouldn't do it at all.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, screw Alabama, Oklahoma, home site playoff game, Texas, Ole Miss, and Austin playoff. Because Tulane might not be Michigan. Let's just scrap this whole thing.
By the way, Appalachian State wasn't supposed to beat Michigan either.
Yeah, that's a silly argument, and I know that's not the whole argument or all of the argument, as far as the reasons why people are against this, but when I do see that of why include these schools? They have absolutely no chance. Yeah, to beat 3 teams in a row, but Tulane could beat Michigan in a one-off, or some other example along those lines.
That's why you play the damn game.
Well, and look, you don't know. What if Michigan would go down to Tulane, which they'll never get to have that ever?
No. Right, exactly. And that would be bigger than any bowl game.
Tulane would have to kidnap the president of Michigan and say the only way we're letting
Connor Stallions.
Yeah, let him go is to you play a home game here on September 10th. That's the only way that's going to happen. So now you got these things. Fans beg for these kind of events at their home sites. I mean, Penn State has usually good people coming in and playing them, but how often would they get Well, I guess they're in a conference now. So,
Yeah.
But Ole Miss and Texas are in conference, but those things just don't always happen.
I just wonder at some point when they get to this number, and I've said this before about like Michigan and Ohio State at the end of the year, if they're both in the top 4, how they will place them to make sure that they don't play in the opening round. I just said that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. In this case, you wonder if that comes into play too. Well, we don't want Ole Miss to play
Georgia in the
second round. But at the same time, that's the way you cannot. You got to go. They got to be neutral across the way. Take away the logos of the conference.
Thing about that too is, if you could, Garrett, I mean, do you mind? Is that Texas Ole Miss game? That's a conference game now.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now, granted, so it's not going to be exactly like this, but so's Oregon and Penn State. So's Alabama, Oklahoma. So, I mean, that's going to be inevitable with these giant conferences now. You're not going to be able to avoid that. You just got to hope, I guess, that either it was a hell of a regular season game or those teams are just really interesting by the end and can run it back and make it.
And they may not even play.
Or they might not play.
Yeah.
And so that's what you hope is that they haven't played in the regular season. So it's a fresher matchup. Or you hope that they get a rematch because it was such a great game. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of crossover is going to be inevitable. And that is a lot of SEC and Big Ten. Looking at that right there, there's Tulane, Florida State.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You realize that? And now, granted, that's going to be different because Oklahoma and Texas are playing in a different conference that they're fighting for top dog right now.
So Utah would be in there or somebody like that.
Yeah, most likely. But, I mean, that's all Big Ten and SEC schools except for 2 of them, based on right now. But yeah, that wouldn't be necessarily the format or the way it's set up in reality when we move forward here. But yeah, I mean, I understand traditionalists and the importance of the regular season. I totally understand that point of the argument. Again, like the Big 12 schedule, not anything can be perfect exactly, but I'm much more interested in this than just the random bowl games that we get right now.
By the way, someone asked, you mentioned Tulane. Let me get to this point first, Paul. Question about Justin R. Why are they not playing at Michigan? Because they're in because of the highest-ranked G5 conference champion. That's part of the rules. But because of their college football ranking, they would be the visiting team to play whoever would be on the other side of the first round. In this case, it's Michigan.
Yeah, and Michigan wouldn't get to host because they're the conference champion. You get to host because you're the conference champion. So that's the benefit to that. I get the regular season defenders, Craig. I understand that. What I don't think they're taking into account for is that this devalues a little bit of September and October, but I think it pays on the back end with the upping of the value of November.
I agree.
It didn't hurt Texas in September beating Alabama.
Well, I mean, okay, yes, but if you're not Alabama and you don't have a mulligan, you have that loss, So let's say Clemson didn't have 4 losses and they had that loss to Duke early in the year. Duke would have been kind of hanging out over them the whole time, and then they're always fighting to get back in. Well, then sometimes those teams in November may lose another one because they realize now it's over. We're going to go to the Peach Bowl and not I said the Peach Bowl. We're going to go to the Blockbuster Bowl anyway. So you kind of lose your gumption. Now, if you're trying to fight hey, if you win these next 2 games, you'll get to 12th from 15th. That's going to make a lot of things more interesting, especially if you're a team that's in that's 7th that is trying to hold on, and the team that's 15th is playing you. That's going to get super interesting.
Just don't lose more than 1 game. I mean, that's the thing. And, so, yeah, if you lose 2 games, then you're putting yourself in trouble, and that's nobody's fault but your own. But you can't afford to lose to Texas or Texas lose to Oklahoma and still be okay, so long as you don't stumble along the way elsewhere. It's really that simple. And there will be room for 2-loss teams in this when you have the field that you do. So I get that, but so Alabama lost to Texas. Are they out of it right now? I mean, are they out of the playoff and all of that right now?
No.
No, that shouldn't be. Just because they lost a game in September in week 2 to a great opponent. So, I get the whole,
they run the table, they're in it.
It demeans the regular season, but, so we're just going to hold a September loss over their head for the entire year, and they don't get a shot at a national title even if they play great the rest of the way. So I think that makes sense. The regular season matters. I totally get that. You need to preserve that as best you can. But it's hard for me to not look at the end of the road. And just knowing what we've had for as long as we've had it, I do kind of like spicing it up and changing it up a little bit and giving us some different looks there at the end of the year. And, we'll see. Maybe it totally sucks, but it's hard for me to look at that and think of Michigan, Tulane, or Georgia, or Oklahoma. Ole Miss, Texas in a playoff game in Austin, or Penn State, Oregon in Eugene. I mean, yeah, that gets me way more excited than the Bahamas Bowl. I mean, it does. So yeah, and there will still be bowl games. Like, there's still bowl games,
and they're going to be playing in bowl games.
Yeah, it's just not that it's the way that we've always known it. But I'm okay with that. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see how they unroll that and how it actually goes off.
Unfortunately.